understanding your personal leadership style and how it can be used effectively in a remote setting. So I'd like to welcome Jill. Jill is currently the President and Chief Marketing Officer at SAP SuccessFactors, an organization with over 200 million users worldwide, providing cloud software solutions to care for the needs of employees, putting them rightfully at the center of business. In this role, Jill is responsible for the end-to-end business, including its growth strategy, vision, and delivery of the product roadmap, and the success of 12,000 customers and over 6,000 employees. Welcome, Jill. We also have Mary Ann, who is the Chief Revenue Officer at SAP SuccessFactors. As an enthusiastic leader at SAP for over 13 years, Mary Ann continues to provide support and motivate others to achieve their goals. As the CRO, she is responsible for building a sustainable revenue model to ensure continued robust sales growth and execution globally for SuccessFactors. She is passionate about employee experience and its importance to creating a successful company. Welcome, Mary Ann. Meg is the Chief Product Officer of SAP SuccessFactors. She is responsible for setting product vision, driving engineering and operations success, and leading the teams that bring the SAP SuccessFactors Human Experience Management Suite to life. Meg is a visionary leader, passionate about leading through business transformation with a people-first innovation mindset. Welcome, Meg. Now, moderating this conversation, we have Power to Fly Summit Coordinator, Bridget. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. We are so excited to have these three amazing women here with us today. They make up the leadership team at SAP SuccessFactors, and they are such successful business leaders. They're proud working parents, and they're incredibly supportive of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace. They're also huge proponents of wellness and work-life balance, of growth and learning opportunities, and most importantly, of each other. I'm so excited to have all three of these ladies here today to share with us their perspectives and talking about the way that they've tackled different areas of business throughout their careers. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And we're so excited to hear about the type of leadership that's needed in a remote workplace and how leaders can identify their leadership styles. First, I'd love to hear from each of you on what the leadership team at SAP does to be unique.
Well, hi, Bridget, and thanks for having us. It's great to be here in this conversation today. I agree, we are unique. I think we're unique for a number of reasons. First of all, we are in constant communication. You know, I think some leadership teams have like bi-weekly meetings or a weekly stand-up or something. Meg and Marianne and I are talking all day long, right? To make sure that we're aligned on the important messages, to ensure that we're sharing the important elements of the overall business so that we can all make great decisions, right, together. On top of that, we trust each other. We trust each other as friends. We trust each other as colleagues in the workplace. And we always have one another's backs. And I am completely confident that no matter what call or meeting Meg or Marianne are in, they've got my back, right? They understand the KPIs of the business that I am passionate about and that I'm driving, and they're going to make sure that those are all protected as well. So I think what we do is special. But Meg, I'll let you have some time here to talk about it as well.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if the uniqueness is within us or between us, but I would definitely say that we are really fortunate to be able to work with each other. I think it's clear, as Jill said, that each of us recognizes the opportunity that we have both for our business in changing work for good, as well as standing in a leadership space as an all-woman leadership team. We recognize this is a gift, and we really see this as something that we take quite seriously, and that we are truly joyful to have that opportunity to do together. So we're really lucky, but I don't think it's just about luck. I think it's about how we show up together. Marianne?
Yeah, look, I agree 100%. And just in case you didn't know, I'm the older one in this crew. So when I started way back when, I worked for a lot of women who were not like Jill and Meg at all. They had literally clawed their way to the top through a sea of white men. And they were really out for themselves rather than for kind of bringing women up with them or supporting the women around them. And so the big difference I see, you've already heard it from Jill and Meg on the trust aspect. We totally trust each other. We know that one is not going to throw the other under the bus ever, right? We've got each other's backs. But I think the other thing that's really important is we build each other up rather than attempt to tear down. And that's what I saw a lot early in my career. Matter of fact, it got so bad, I was like, please just give me a man to work for. I do not want to work for another woman.
Wow, that is so amazing. And I really just want to echo and amplify a couple of notes that I heard from all three of you. One, having each other's backs, and two, especially here, Marianne, building each other up at all times. I think that that's so important. And I'm so glad that you're all so aligned and working together really for that higher mission. Now, as other teams, other folks are watching and are here today, what are some tangible ways leaders and managers can help their teams be successful in a remote environment? You know, today, most people are remote at least a percentage of the time. And I think that that's where leadership and management can it can be a gray area. Not everybody has experience working in a remote setting. And what are some tangible tips that folks could use?
Bridget, I think one of the things that we should all remember as leaders and even as participants on calls, that we have to model the right behavior. And modeling the right behavior means that everything that you say is an example for someone else, right? Everything that you do, how you show up, your energy, your passion, the words that you use, all those things are models. And in that same vein, we have to model things that we want perpetuated through our organization. One of those things is authenticity. Another is vulnerability. And I think in today's world, we have to model actively both of those two concepts. So, and they kind of fit together, right? First of all, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. As you mentioned, when you have each other's back, when you know that people are going to build you up, it's easier to be vulnerable. So creating that inclusive environment where you're looking out for each other. And even when you're giving critical feedback, you're giving it for the good of the team or the person or the business outcome. And then next, being authentic. And sometimes that means showing up not perfect, being able to bring your whole selves to work, sharing a little bit about, a challenge that you're having, because we all jump into these calls right now with our perfect agenda, trying to accomplish these things and driving to the goal. But we've got humans on the other side of this camera, and everything is not perfect. And they need to know that in their world where things aren't perfect, they're not alone.
Yeah, I think that I'm fortunate that I've had global teams for, decades. And so this isn't a new experience for me. And I will tell you that over time, I have personally evolved my leadership style to have a couple key elements. I think Jill touched on them. One is to show up real. So yes, there's context. Sometimes you're doing an all hand and real is a large global meeting. And sometimes you're doing small group meetings within different regions. But at the end of the day, it's really important that people see you and the fullness of you. And you have to put more effort into it when it's virtual. You have to be intentional about it. You have to say some things out loud that people might observe. Being around you in a more relaxed context, you have to be intentional about it. And I think the other thing is having a little bit more empathy and clarity for what's going on for other people when you're dealing with a global team or you're dealing with a big change like we all had in the pandemic. It's really important to ground yourself into the realities of others, not just yourself. You get that when you're in an office with a group, but it's a lot harder when you're home and you're in your own context. So you have to put extra work in understanding, hey, my Shanghai team is completely locked down right now and can't even get out for groceries. But my San Francisco-based people are pretty much opening up and able to connect and be together. Having some empathy and clarity for what that means for each of the individuals becomes important so that you don't have a misstep with the team.
Yeah, I would add that availability aspect is so critical. It's always been critical. I know for me, if my boss took the time to have dinner or lunch with me and actually literally get to know me. That made a big impression on me. Well, we've had to over-rotate on that in the pandemic, right? We have to be available for those one-on-ones. In every single note or all hands I do, I basically invite people to reach out to me. What's interesting, some do, but I would say the majority don't. And then when they do reach out, it is on us not to multitask, right? To truly listen. And probably more importantly, to maybe ask that extra question. And I'll give you a quick example. I was talking to a guy, called him for some information. I just said, "Hey, Jim, how's it going?" And he said, "Okay." And I could have just gone right on and asked my question. But instead, I said, "Well, it doesn't sound like everything's okay. Is everything okay?" "Well, I've got COVID. My son-in-law's in the hospital." I mean, it was like I'm taking care of my grandkids. So just like asking that extra question and then really listening and offering whatever help, whether it's practical or simply emotional support that you can do, I think is really, really important right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to go back to something that Meg said, and this can kind of bring us into our next segment. But Meg, you touched on the concept of you understand your personal leadership style. So I'm wondering if each of you can kind of talk about the importance of remote leaders understanding their own leadership style and how that can be applied to day-to-day operations and interactions with not only other leaders, but your employees and direct reports as well.
Jill, you want to start that one or you want me to?
Go ahead, Meg. I'll follow you this time.
So this is such an important point for me, and I think it spans much further than just leadership style. I spend a lot of time on this with anybody that I talk to, because to me, this is the trick for making work good and for inviting the kind of opportunities that we want to see in the world as it relates to work. So I think it's really important for each of us to understand what we bring to the table and how that's unique, and quit trying to fit into a box of what do we think it means to be a leader or a worker or employee or in any way that we show up in this world. I think it's really important that we recognize that there is something special that each of us brings. And in that, the better job we can do in clarifying that for people and helping people understand us better, not only opens up better and deeper and broader relationships, but also creates the space for finding help in the things that aren't in your power alley. So one of the reasons that Jill and Marianne and I work so well together is that in that deep trust that we have, we also can be very clear with each other which things are hard for us, and recognize that the other person can maybe help us out and augment in that. And so I think as a leader, being confident in your own skin and being clear what you bring to the table, it's not an ego trip. It's actually really, really important, because you can only really show your maximum potential when you're really dealing with your area of strength. And so quit pretending that you're something you're not. Own who you are and show up for your team and give them permission to do the same. They shouldn't want to be like you. They should want to be the best version of themselves. That's kind of how I see the world, and that's how I see the future of work being something that I want to be a part of.
I love it. And I think we talk about this a lot amongst the three of us, Bridget, because the other thing is you continue to evolve as a person, right? And you continue to get to know what other strengths you have, or maybe you want to grow some strengths. And if you're honest with the leadership team you're working with, then they can help support you in that, right? But also, we may look very similar, like the three of us are women who've spent our years in tech, right? And there are a lot of things that might look similar. We are so different. I mean, Meg and Marianne and I might be the three most different humans on the planet. And we appreciate that. That means that when we have a need for someone who's going to be gracious and lovely, we call Marianne. Because Meg and I don't always fill that gap perfectly well, right? But those are the kind of things you know about each other if you're vulnerable, if you're sharing your strengths, your weaknesses, your challenges. And another thing about vulnerability that plays here is asking for feedback, because the world continues to change. And what our employees need, what our teams need, is often changing too. They need something different. We thought we were communicating too much in the early days of the pandemic. We got feedback that no, they actually wanted to hear from us more because they didn't trust their governments. They didn't trust other things. They wanted to hear from the leadership team at their company because they trusted that leadership team. So we changed our communication styles. That's continuing to change as well, right? So continuing to ask for feedback, asking for it in different settings so that people are able to give that honest feedback allows you to be relevant in your leadership style to the needs of your teams.
And Bridget, I would just add, we all know that, as Jill just said, we're all very different. Well, the people we manage are very different. And so our management style has to adjust to them. And it was something that in my very first leadership training class at SAP, I had been a leader before, but at SAP, they had a whole module on this about how you change what you do to fit the employee. And basically, I think the things that are important is the empathy, the transparency that you show, just the understanding of who it is you're dealing with. You may be dealing with a super senior person or a super junior person. Obviously, you're going to course correct depending on which it is. And then just being vocal about the fact that there are going to be twists and turns. There are going to be ups and downs. And we basically have to kind of step back sometimes, maybe recharge, and then come right back at it full time. And then, of course, making sure that we recognize employees' successes. And when there are things that need to be changed, that we're upfront and honest about it, because that does nothing but good for the employee as well as for the manager.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question from the audience with regard to what styles of leadership are preferred when working remotely. And you each kind of touched on the concept that all leaders are different and also all employees are different. But I'm wondering if maybe any of you have some core pillars that no matter who the person is, you're always embodying those characteristics when communicating with other leaders as well as your employees.
Okay, I'm going to start. Look, I think bottom line, caring, truly listening, being honest, and having that empathetic view, because we don't know what everybody is actually dealing with, right? We usually only know like the surface. And so basically taking the time to make sure that they know you are there for them, I think that wins every time.
I would say one thing. Oh, go ahead, Jill. Okay, I'll go. One thing that I'm personally working on as part of this pandemic is just recognizing that the glimpses people get of me are so small that I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that I show up my best when I have remote interactions. Probably more so than I would have in person, because it's easy for people to analyze the way that I show up. And personally, it's there's a lot of complexity in my job and in my personality. So I've had to put extra effort into making sure that I didn't bring a prior meeting into the next meeting from an energy point of view, because then people might assume it's about their interaction with me versus just the fact that the last meeting, maybe was a budget meeting or sort of a complicated problem solving meeting. And so making sure that I create space that doesn't cause people to get the wrong understanding of our interaction, I think is something that I take a little bit more seriously now, because of the fact that all the interactions are remote.
Bridget, there's a trust equation that you can easily Google out there, and it talks about a lot of the things that we just shared. So the things that you try to maximize, and this is what I literally live by it. It's up on my whiteboard all the time. But trying to understand the situation whenever you're going into it, that's credibility. Being reliable, so doing what you say you're going to do. Caring, that intimacy, and reducing self-orientation. I think often, as Meg mentioned, sometimes you come out of the last call and you're worried about like the emotions that you have coming out of that last call. And so you're carrying those in. If I can context switch, like create enough time in between calls so I can context switch and think about the people on the other side of the camera, that allows me to be a better leader, because I'm more focused on the audience than I am on whatever was inside of me from that last experience. So I'd say that trust equation is a nice guide for any leader that's out there trying to be authentic and real.
So basically what Meg was trying to say is I want to be more like Jill. There you go.
The trust equation. I just took that down on my notebook. I hope that everyone watching did that. I'm going to share it with everyone that I know. And Jill, you had mentioned, as leaders, you're always evolving, just like anybody else. And upskilling is often thought of something for employees, but how can management upskilling benefit a remote workplace?
Oh, well, it's critical. I mean, I would say that, a company can't survive if it's not constantly looking to enable, empower, and upskill their managers, because managers need to learn too. We talk about employees learning, but managers have to learn and stay even ahead of, right, what the employees are doing and learning. And so, I think anytime that you're in a period of disruption, you need to learn where you're going. You need to think about, the skills that you need to prepare for what's ahead. And today we're constantly being disrupted. So with this ever increasing pace of change, our managers need regular engagement and regular learning in order to stay ahead of the game. And we need to realize that the learning that used to happen around the water cooler, if you will, or out in the hallway, just sharing, that doesn't happen anymore. And so we have to be more deliberate about how we're passing along the information that's important to our leaders and managers.
I guess I would love to add on to the learning concept, because, for me personally, learning feeds my soul. And I think it is what actually drove me into a career in tech in the first place, because the need is so acute to stay current, to keep aware of changes. But when I think about like how I bring that forward across the teams and foster that in a larger organization, I really get back to the need for amplifying curiosity. So I spend a lot of time both trying to model that, but also clarify that, right? It isn't sufficient to just know the things that you know or be good at the things you're good at. If you really want to thrive, you have to do more. You have to continue to push the boundary, because the world of work is changing so much. The fields of technology are changing so much that no one can stay in one place and be relevant. And to be honest, that window is really closing in. It used to be you could probably stick to a 5-year window of relevance. And now I actually believe it's closer to 18 months. And so that creates an entirely different foundation under which you have to think about growth and learning and development. You cannot think about it as something you do once and it holds for any level of your career, let alone any period of time. You have to think about it as an ongoing thing. And so again, what I really encourage people to start with is start with curiosity. If you just continue to feed the curiosity of your brain, you will ultimately continue to drive yourself to learning and development and growth. And that, I think, is the key that helps make it all more manageable and not so overwhelming.
Well, and I'd like to kind of bring in a topic that's been kind of beaten to death, but it's around the Great Resignation. I mean, 80% of women have said over the last 2+ years, they have way more on their plate. They have way more on their plate at home and way more on their plate at work. That's part of the reason that more than 4 million women have left the workforce since March 2020. And, it's something that hits home for me because I left the workforce for 10 years. When I had kids, I took 10 years off. Back then, there weren't the programs in place to help with that reskilling and upskilling and learning that was absolutely critical, because in 10 years, technology drastically changes. Now, that's not the case, right? There are a number of organizations. I'm personally involved with Path Forward, And one of our great partners from a technology perspective is the Mom Project. And both of these entities help women come back into the workplace, or men, after an extended leave, whether for childcare, elder care, whatever the reason. But what about the people who stayed behind, right? They've now likely got more on their plate because those responsibilities that were handled by those who left have come to them. So bottom line, we've got to make sure that they're upskilled, that they feel valued. And we really need to focus on them as well as those returnees.
Yeah, absolutely. So leaders are often expected to motivate their people, but I don't think we talk about enough, how do we keep these leaders motivated, and how do they do that while simultaneously still empowering their teams? And then also, how should employees and managers alike keep healthy and avoid burnout, especially in a remote setting?
Okay, I'll start with a little story, because I think this is common, especially for moms, people who are caretakers for others as well. My dad used to call me in the morning, Friday mornings on my way to work, and he'd say, "Hey, how are you doing this week? Are you taking care of yourself? Because you can't take care of my grandkids if you're not taking care of yourself." And my dad was a great man, an incredible, wise motivator and reminder. He did that every Friday morning. So it got into my head, what am I doing to take care of myself? And he could always hear it, and I could feel it when I wasn't taking care of myself. And that meant my kids weren't getting the best of me, and work wasn't getting the best of me, because I wasn't drawing the boundaries I needed to take care of myself. And so I draw some pretty strong boundaries right now around sleep, because I need it and I love it, and around workouts, because I have to do it a couple times a week or I go crazy. And there are lots of parts of me that don't work if I'm not doing those two things. Everybody has something that's different. I'm just giving you some examples of what works for me. But I think we do have to encourage and empower everyone to take care of themselves and celebrate it when they do, so that those behaviors are reinforced. So those are the things that I do. And once we understand that that's so important, you can model it, you can encourage it, and you can celebrate it even better.
Yeah, I would just add a couple things. So the way that I look at this is across two fronts, because I get asked this question all the time. How do you manage? How do you survive? How do you, all of those questions are really the same question built in. I think there's kind of two core things that you need to think about. One, I encourage people to really get, spend some time with themselves and think about the stories they tell themselves. Most of the time, I find that when we're overwhelmed, we tell ourselves a lot of stories of lacking and of, things that we're not doing. And that creates its own spiral. And especially in times like this, where we're under all this pressure and there's all these things going on, take a step back and tell yourself a better story, because that's going to help you in all of the other things. And then the second thing is figure out how you can do things differently, and specifically how you can get more help. I share this a lot because I think a lot of people, and I see it more in women, but it's not exclusive to women. There's a lot of guilt for, again, tied to this story, all the things I'm not doing, all the things that, I'm falling short. I don't think guilt is particularly helpful in that as an emotion. I think it's a much more productive emotion, as Jill said, of how am I thinking about taking care of myself? What are the priorities that I have, and how do I make sure that I'm in balance to my priorities? Not in balance to my work life, because I don't think that actually exists. Not in balance to somebody else's ideals. What's important to me, and how can I get help with every other thing that is not important to me? So those are the things that I just look to. Is, again, every day I just say, okay, it's not a solvable problem. How do I put those boundaries in place so that I can thrive, versus hold myself to somebody else's sort of Instagram persona of perfection?
Well, and I think back to modeling behaviors. Look, something that's important to me, nails, hair, right? I mean, when that gray starts showing through, I am in the hair place. And being open about that, being open about it with your employees, being open about it with your boss. Hey, I'm doing these things. It's important to me. Taking vacations. Last year, I took a 2-week driving vacation. I posted pictures all along that trip on LinkedIn, not Facebook. Why did I do that? Because I wanted everybody on my team to see it's okay. Take the time, talk about it, recharge. You're not on calls, right? You are truly taking the time. So I think that's important. The other thing that I did when my kids were little, I was in their classroom every single week. I was very open with my boss about that was a priority. It was on my calendar. I'll tell you what I didn't do so well, though, that I wish I'd done better. When I made them breakfast or picked them up from school, 9 times out of 10, I was on a call, right? And I'm shushing them instead of listening to them. So would I change that? Absolutely. And one last story that hit home for me, I made them cookies one time after school. I kid you not, they walked in and I said, oh, I got fresh baked cookies. They could smell them, you know. They said, are you and Dad getting a divorce? No, but that's how bad it was. So there, you know, like, take the time, right? It's such a short period of time that we have our kids at home and we want to make the most of it. We want to listen to them. We don't want them thinking that we're getting divorced because we made them cookies.
Yeah. Oh, these are all such important tips. This was a great conversation. I can't thank you all enough for being here. We did have a couple of audience questions we didn't get to, and I'm certain that everyone here would love to connect with you all more. So everybody in the audience, please head to the chat. We have linked some great ways to connect with all 3 of these leaders. And also we have provided a link to Jill's book. You can pre-order it now. We are so thankful to have you all here. We sincerely appreciate it. And we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Bridget.
everyone.
Thanks, Bridget.
Thanks, everyone.